Lewis Hamilton betrays Ferrari to join Mercedes before the Singapore Grand Prix. Stay until the end to find out when Ferrari will leak the news and be the first to know. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. From the very first whispers that began to ripple through the corridors of the Formula One paddock, the atmosphere was filled with disbelief, denial, and ultimately a stunned sense of shock as the reality slowly began to crystallize that Lewis Hamilton, the seven-time world champion and one of the most decorated athletes in the history of the sport, was maneuvering behind tightly closed doors to dismantle what many insiders had once labeled as an unbreakable partnership with Ferrari. The deal between Hamilton and the Scuderia had been unveiled to the world with great spectacle, presented as the crowning jewel of his career, the grand final chapter that was supposed to define his legacy in the most legendary team in motorsport history. Yet, what has now emerged paints a picture that is far more complex, far more calculated, and infinitely more dramatic. Behind the carefully staged smiles and press conference affirmations, Hamilton had been working relentlessly, discreetly, and with a sharp strategic edge alongside none other than his former mentor and longtime ally Toto Wolff, in what many are already describing as one of the most sensational comeback stories the sport has ever seen, the orchestration of his return to Mercedes. According to individuals close to the negotiations, this was not a story born of impulse or driven purely by emotion. Instead, it was the product of meticulous planning, countless hours of guarded communication, and ruthless deliberation. The talks themselves were described as layered and complex, weaving through issues that extended far beyond base salary figures. There were questions of team dynamics, delicate considerations over the current Mercedes driver lineup, and even debates over technical direction, car development strategies, and the long-term vision of the Silver Arrows project. Hamilton, fully aware that his reputation within Ferrari was eroding after a stormy period marred by strategic blunders, performance disputes, and an ever-widening lack of trust between himself and the Maranello leadership, began sending subtle but unmistakable signals to Wolff. He made it clear that he no longer felt bound by loyalty to a contract that extended beyond September 30th, and that the dream of conquering the sport in Ferrari Red had quickly transformed into a frustrating reality where victory seemed further away with each passing race. The renewal of his alliance with Wolff has been described as nothing short of cinematic. The two men, who had once dominated Formula One together in an era of near-total supremacy, reignited their professional bond through a series of clandestine meetings arranged with the utmost secrecy. Some encounters happened in quiet, neutral locations far from the watchful eyes of the paddock and the prying lenses of the media, while others were carried out under the cover of night via heavily encrypted communication channels. Those privy to these interactions claim that Hamilton was not pleading from a place of weakness or nostalgia. Instead, he argued with a fierce conviction that Ferrari, despite its history and its brand power, lacked the structure, efficiency, and unity to deliver him the championship-winning car he so desperately craved before the inevitable countdown of his career reached its conclusion. For Wolff, who has always asserted in private and in public that Hamilton remains the most complete, effective, and unparalleled driver to ever command a Mercedes cockpit, the response was immediate. He did not hesitate. The moment Hamilton signaled his willingness, Wolff opened the door wide, and from that instant, the wheels of this extraordinary reunion began to accelerate at breathtaking speed. The financial negotiations were, as expected, a battleground in themselves. While Hamilton was unwavering in his desire to return to the team that had propelled him to 6 of his 7 world titles, he also demanded a contract that reflected both recognition and respect, but without descending into excess. The discussions, according to insiders, often stretched late into the night, at times lasting until dawn, as Hamilton and Wolff debated the finer details, the structure of the contract, the balance between base salary and performance-related bonuses, and the symbolic nature of the numbers. Ultimately, they arrived at a figure of $20 million per season, a number that both men considered more than just financial. For Hamilton, it was an acknowledgement of his enduring worth without being the kind of bloated paycheck that could alienate the team or ignite criticism. For Wolff, it was a statement of balance, an amount that respected Hamilton's legendary status while keeping the focus on the shared mission, restoring Mercedes to the summit of Formula One. It was a deal rooted in symbolism, far below the stratospheric figures Hamilton had once commanded at Ferrari, but infinitely richer in meaning. Crucially, the agreement was not static. Built into the contract were performance-based incentives, carefully structured bonuses that could see Hamilton's earnings soar well above the base figure if he succeeded in guiding Mercedes back to championship glory. It was an arrangement that tied his personal success directly to the team's revival, binding both driver and constructor into a single shared destiny where every podium, every victory, and every title challenge carried weight beyond mere statistics. This revelation has shaken the sport to its core. For the fans, for the teams, and for the journalists who have followed Hamilton's journey for decades, the prospect of witnessing him don the silver overalls once again is nothing short of electrifying. It is a story laced with betrayal, resilience, nostalgia, and the kind of high-stakes drama that Formula One thrives on. The man who was once heralded as Ferrari's ultimate savior is now poised to walk away, not with bitterness alone, but with a calculated determination to rewrite the ending of his career on his own terms, in the colors of the team where his legend was forged. For Mercedes, it is not merely about reclaiming a driver, it is about reigniting an era, about recapturing the synergy that once rendered them untouchable. For Hamilton, it is about silencing the doubters, about proving that he still possesses the hunger, the fire, and the unmatched ability to rise again when the world least expects it. And for the sport itself, it is about bearing witness to one of the most stunning plot twists in its modern history, a development that will be analyzed, debated, and remembered for years to come. One of the most contentious and emotionally charged elements of the entire agreement lay in the internal dynamics of Mercedes, where the existing lineup became the focal point of a storm. At the very heart of this storm was Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the young Italian sensation who had been carefully nurtured and prepared for years to take his rightful place as the face of Mercedes' future. Every step of his career had been strategically managed under the watchful eye of Toto Wolff, who saw in him not only raw speed and natural talent, but also the potential to carry the team into a new era. Antonelli had been regarded by many as the symbol of Mercedes' long-term vision, a driver who could potentially replicate the dominance that Lewis Hamilton himself had once delivered. Yet, when Hamilton's sudden availability presented itself, Wolff made a decision that shocked even those closest to the inner circle. In what insiders have described as one of the coldest yet most pragmatic moves of his career, Wolff sat Antonelli down and told him directly that he would no longer have a seat for the upcoming season, as Mercedes had decided to immediately reinstate Hamilton. Those present during that meeting claimed the atmosphere was tense but not disrespectful. Wolff was deliberate, firm, and brutally honest, emphasizing that opportunities like this do not come around twice, and no team could afford to turn down the chance to bring back a driver who has not only defined an era of the sport but who also remains one of the fiercest competitors on the grid. Wolff stressed that with Red Bull continuing to extend its dominance, with McLaren resurging through aggressive development, and with Ferrari attempting to claw back relevance, Mercedes had to act decisively. To him, Hamilton's return represented not just a sentimental reunion, but a strategic masterstroke to recalibrate the balance of power in Formula One. The weight of the decision was not lost on Antonelli. The Italian prodigy, who had carried the hopes of an entire factory with him, reportedly sat quietly, listened, and then responded with a level of composure and maturity that belied his age. Though visibly disappointed, he acknowledged that the arrival of Hamilton was not just another driver change but a seismic shift that could redefine the trajectory of the entire sport. Those close to him have since revealed that while he felt robbed of a once-in-a-lifetime chance, he also understood that Hamilton's return to Mercedes was the kind of move that transcended individual ambitions. While this delicate and almost ruthless maneuvering unfolded in Brackley, over in Maranello the atmosphere was far more chaotic. Ferrari's top brass were blindsided, largely left in the dark as Hamilton's lawyers and management team quietly and meticulously combed through the fine print of his contract. What they unearthed was nothing short of explosive, a very specific set of exit clauses buried within the terms of his deal, clauses that, if exercised before September 30th, would allow Hamilton to walk away without facing crippling financial penalties. This legal escape route was known only to a select few within Hamilton's innermost circle, and it quickly became the weapon with which he pried open the doors to freedom. For Ferrari, the discovery came too late. By the time whispers began to circulate, the momentum was already irreversible, and Hamilton had the leverage firmly in his grasp. The Scuderia, still reeling from years of internal power struggles, failed strategies, and a constant reshuffling of leadership, found itself staring down yet another catastrophe. To lose Hamilton not after a multi-year campaign but midway through his very first season with them was a humiliation few in Maranello could have imagined. For the Tifosi, the revelation landed like a thunderclap. They had placed their hopes, their passion, and their unwavering devotion into the idea that Hamilton would be the man to restore Ferrari to the pinnacle of the sport, to finally deliver the championship that had eluded them since Kimi Räikkönen in 2007. Instead, they were confronted with the bitter reality that their superstar had not only chosen to leave but had done so by exploiting a legal technicality that underscored just how fragile their grasp on him truly was. Among the fanbase, the reaction has been nothing short of volcanic. Social media is flooded with despair, anger, and disbelief, with some describing the decision as the ultimate betrayal. For the Ferrari faithful, Hamilton's abrupt departure is not merely a contractual matter. It is the shattering of a dream, the collapse of a narrative that promised redemption and glory. The devastation is palpable, the sense of betrayal so raw that it threatens to overshadow everything else happening in the season. Ferrari, once again, finds itself at the center of heartbreak, left to pick up the pieces while Mercedes seizes a golden opportunity. And in the middle of it all, Hamilton, with his unyielding determination and uncanny ability to bend the sport to his will, has once again proven that Formula One is as much about power, politics, and timing as it is about speed on the track. Mercedes has been moving in the shadows with a level of precision and efficiency that feels almost military, quietly setting the stage for a return that could alter the entire narrative of the Formula One season. While the headlines swirl with rumors and speculation, inside Brackley every detail is being refined with almost obsessive focus. Reports suggest that Toto Wolff has already made sure Lewis Hamilton is being physically accommodated for the W16, with the cockpit undergoing tailored modifications so that every single movement, from the placement of his hands on the wheel to the pressure of his feet on the pedals, feels as natural as breathing. Engineers who once stood side by side with Hamilton during his golden years at Mercedes have been called back into active duty, reopening archives of past telemetry, reviving intricate data models, and cross-referencing thousands of performance variables to recreate the intimate connection between man and machine that once made them unstoppable. Simulators are not only calibrated to his historical driving preferences, but are also being adjusted in real time with projections of how he might evolve his style in this new chapter. And insiders claim Hamilton's fingerprints are already embedded in the very DNA of the virtual car before the team even travels to the track. The timing of this carefully orchestrated move is no coincidence, and Wolff knows it. Bringing Hamilton back into the fold just in time for the Singapore Grand Prix is a decision layered with symbolism and strategic brilliance. Singapore is not just another race on the calendar. It is one of the most physically demanding and mentally exhausting events, a glittering night spectacle that punishes mistakes and rewards perfection. Under the floodlights, with the Marina Bay skyline blazing in the background, Hamilton will once again step into the silver colors that defined his legacy, the image itself destined to reverberate through the sport as a statement of intent. For Wolff, the visual is as powerful as the competitive angle. Hamilton back in silver, cutting through the darkness of the Singapore night, a gladiator returning to the arena where legends are either broken or immortalized. But beyond the theatrics, there is hard, cold strategy at play. The Singapore circuit has a reputation for exposing every flaw a car may hide. Its relentless corners, brutal braking zones, and narrow streets demand flawless balance and absolute synergy between driver and machine. This is a track where technical shortcomings cannot be disguised and where only those with the sharpest instincts can truly dominate. It is precisely the type of battleground where Hamilton has historically thrived, combining endurance, patience, and split-second aggression to bend the race to his will. By choosing Singapore as the stage for his comeback, Mercedes is not just aiming for spectacle, it is staking a claim, declaring that Hamilton's return is not about nostalgia but about unleashing him in the kind of environment where he can immediately demonstrate that his fire has never faded. The anticipation surrounding this move is electric, and the psychological impact on rivals cannot be underestimated. Every team will arrive in Singapore knowing that the spotlight is no longer theirs to control, and every driver will be aware that Hamilton, once again clad in silver, is preparing to rewrite the storylines. The combination of symbolism, strategy, and sheer spectacle ensures that this is not simply a driver stepping back into a car, it is a moment designed to shake the very foundations of the championship battle. The whispers around the paddock have already begun to swell into a roar, with every insider, journalist, and rival team member dissecting what Hamilton's return to Mercedes truly signifies. This is not simply a contractual move, nor is it just another driver changing seats in search of greener pastures. This is psychological warfare, a maneuver that carries with it an energy capable of shaking the very foundation of Formula One. Ferrari, a team that once believed it had secured the loyalty of one of the sport's greatest icons, now finds itself stunned, hollowed out by the weight of betrayal. Publicly, the Scuderia will almost certainly attempt to minimize the blow, dressing it up as part of the natural ebb and flow of competition, insisting they remain focused on the future. Yet everyone behind the curtains of Maranello knows the truth, that the wound is deep, that the departure of a figure as seismic as Hamilton is more than just a driver leaving. It is a signal to the entire grid that Ferrari failed to provide the environment he craved, and the damage to their image will linger long after the press statements fade. For Mercedes, however, this is not merely about reclaiming lost ground or gathering points to salvage another season. It is about rewriting the script of dominance. Hamilton's return is a declaration, an act designed to destabilize every rival garage, to force every team principal and strategist into sleepless nights. It is a message written in bold letters. Mercedes is not finished, and it remains capable of making the kind of moves that alter the balance of power across the sport. The ripple effect of this reunion extends far beyond the circuits and pit lanes. Sponsors who had begun to drift away during the team's leaner years are said to be lining up once again, eager to be associated with a narrative of redemption and resurgence. Television networks are already preparing for unprecedented coverage, aware that Hamilton's return will draw not only die-hard fans but casual viewers from around the globe, transforming every race into must-watch drama. Even rival team principals, men and women known for their composure under the brightest lights, are reportedly bracing themselves for the storm, recognizing that Hamilton's presence is not just physical but psychological, a force that warps pressure, magnifies stakes, and unsettles even the most confident opponents. And then there is Hamilton himself. Outwardly, he has been careful, measured, offering only vague allusions to unfinished business and the right timing when confronted with questions. His words are like smoke, deliberately elusive, designed to build intrigue while concealing the fire burning beneath the surface. Yet those with access to the inner sanctums of Mercedes whisper a different story. Behind closed doors, Hamilton is said to be electric once again, energized in a way he has not been for years, reinvigorated by the chance to take control of his destiny. He is not returning as a man looking for one last paycheck or a ceremonial farewell tour. He is returning as a warrior intent on rewriting the ending to his legend. Every training session, every debrief, every private meeting is infused with a singular focus: to prove that his hunger has not dimmed, to silence those who ever dared to doubt that he still possesses the relentless drive that made him a seven-time champion. For Toto Wolff, this is not merely a driver returning, it is the rekindling of a partnership that once defined an entire era. Their relationship, forged through triumphs, controversies, heartbreaks, and celebrations, stands as one of the most iconic alliances in the sport's history. Together, they carved out a dynasty, and now reunited, they believe they can topple Red Bull's dominance, dismantle Ferrari's ambitions, and orchestrate a final act that will echo through the history of Formula One. This is not nostalgia, it is strategy. It is Wolff and Hamilton, side by side once more, aiming to remind the paddock of what true synergy between driver and team can accomplish. And as the countdown to their first race together begins, the air is thick with anticipation, with rivals glancing nervously over their shoulders, with fans holding their breath, and with an undeniable sense that something monumental is about to unfold. By the moment the cars roll into position beneath the glittering floodlights of Marina Bay, the atmosphere will be unlike anything Formula One has experienced in recent memory. The very air will feel electric, charged with disbelief, excitement, and the raw anticipation of history being rewritten in real time. Few could have ever imagined that Lewis Hamilton, the driver who only months ago was heralded as Ferrari's crown jewel and the centerpiece of their long-term vision, would cast aside the famous red before the calendar had even reached its final quarter. Yet here he stands, adorned once again in the unmistakable silver and black of Mercedes, returning not as a guest, not as a legend of the past, but as a competitor, strapped into a machine that symbolizes the most dominant era of his career. At his side, orchestrating every move with trademark precision and steel-nerved focus, is Toto Wolff, the architect of Hamilton's most glorious years, the man who knows better than anyone how to unleash every ounce of speed, aggression, and hunger within the seven-time world champion. The numbers alone are staggering. $20 million exchanged to tear Hamilton from the red embrace of Maranello and thrust him back into the seat of the car that defined him, that carried him through unforgettable battles, that carved his name into the record books. The betrayal of Ferrari is still raw, a wound that has barely begun to bleed, leaving Tifosi across the world stunned, angry, heartbroken, and yet unable to look away. For Mercedes fans, this moment feels like the return of a hero, the revival of a bond that once seemed unbreakable but had been left fractured by time and circumstance. And for the neutral, for those who simply crave drama, intensity, and the raw theater of sport, this spectacle is nothing short of perfect, a storyline so improbable it feels scripted, and yet it is playing out under the dazzling lights of Singapore. Every camera lens will be locked on Hamilton as he lowers himself into the cockpit, every whisper of the crowd building into a roar, every rival on the grid stealing glances to gauge his body language, his posture, his fire. What does it mean for Charles Leclerc, the young driver left behind in Ferrari's pit wall politics, watching his supposed mentor and teammate vanish without warning? What does it mean for George Russell, who suddenly finds himself once again under the same roof as the man who defined an entire generation of Mercedes dominance? What does it mean for Red Bull, McLaren, Aston Martin, and every other challenger who must now contend not only with Max Verstappen's relentless pursuit of victory, but with the rebirth of Hamilton's most dangerous partnership. The world is holding its breath because Singapore is not just another race. It is a theater of shadows and light, a circuit that demands absolute perfection, a place where legends have risen and dreams have been destroyed in an instant. And into this crucible steps Hamilton, armed with everything he has ever known about pressure, about resilience, about silencing doubt. He does not arrive to make up the numbers. He arrives to hunt, to chase, to prove that loyalty and betrayal, money and legacy, all fall away the moment the visor comes down and the engine ignites. This is more than a comeback. It is an upheaval, a statement, an earthquake that will send shockwaves through the sport for years. A moment so seismic that fans will recall it decades from now as the night Singapore became more than just a race under the lights. It became the stage for one of the most dramatic, intoxicating, and emotionally charged chapters in Formula One history.